The moment Nora Hayes stepped off the stagecoach in Bisbee, Arizona territory, dust swirling around her worn boots, she knew the whispers would start again like they always did in every new place she tried to call home. Her right leg dragged slightly behind her left as she descended, the result of a childhood fever that had ravaged her small body when she was only 5 years old. The year was 1883, and at 22 years old, she had learned to read the sideways glances and hear the hushed comments that followed her like a persistent shadow. "Look at how she walks," came a voice from somewhere near the general store. "Poor thing," another responded with that particular tone of pity that made Nora's stomach turn. She straightened her shoulders and smoothed down the front of her simple gray traveling dress, determined not to let them see how their words still found their marks after all these years. Her Aunt Martha had died 3 months prior, leaving Nora a small house on the outskirts of Bisbee and enough money to survive for perhaps 6 months if she was careful. It was more than she had ever owned before, more than she had ever hoped for in her 22 years of moving from town to town, always running from the mockery, always searching for somewhere she might belong. The house was smaller than she had imagined from her aunt's letters, but it was sturdy and clean, with whitewashed walls and a porch that overlooked a stretch of scrubland dotted with mesquite and sage. Nora spent her first week scrubbing floors and mending curtains, trying to make the place feel like it might actually be a home rather than just another temporary shelter. On the 8th day, she ventured into town to purchase supplies. The general store was crowded with Saturday shoppers, and Nora felt their eyes on her as she moved slowly down the aisles, her limp more pronounced when she was tired. She had learned long ago to hold her head high despite the stairs, though it never quite stopped the ache in her chest. "Careful there," a woman said loudly as Nora passed. "Clumsy thing might knock something over." Heat flooded Nora's cheeks, but she kept moving, gathering flour and sugar and coffee with methodical precision. She was reaching for a tin of beans on a high shelf when a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. "That is Bennett Walker," the shopkeeper's wife said in a reverent whisper. "Just rode in from his ranch." Nora glanced through the window and saw a tall man dismounting from a large bay horse. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, but as he turned toward the store, she caught sight of his face. 3 long scars ran down the left side, from temple to jaw, pulling slightly at the corner of his eye and mouth. They were old scars, healed silver white against his sun-bronzed skin, but they were impossible to miss. The women in the store fell silent as he entered, then resumed their shopping with exaggerated casualness. Nora noticed how they averted their eyes, how they gave him a wider berth than necessary. She recognized that particular dance of avoidance all too well. Bennett Walker was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that needed cutting and blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He nodded politely to the shopkeeper and began gathering his own supplies with the efficiency of a man who had done this many times before. Nora returned her attention to the shelf, finally managing to grasp the tin of beans. As she turned, her foot caught on an uneven floorboard, and she stumbled. The tin flew from her hands, and she braced herself for the impact with the floor that her weak leg would not prevent. Instead, strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her with surprising gentleness. She looked up into Bennett Walker's face, close enough now to see that his eyes were the color of deep water. "Are you all right, miss?" His voice was low and rough, like gravel shifting. "I am fine, thank you," Nora managed, acutely aware of the attention they were drawing. She expected him to release her quickly, to step away as most people did, but he held on until he was certain she had her balance. He bent to retrieve the fallen tin, then handed it to her. Floor's uneven just there. Nearly tripped me up the first time, too. It was a kindness, that small lie. Nora knew perfectly well that her limp had caused the stumble, and surely he knew it too. But his eyes held no pity, no mockery, only a straightforward honesty that made her throat tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," she said softly. Something flickered across his scarred face. Surprise, perhaps, that she knew his name. "My pleasure, Miss Hayes, Nora Hayes. You are Martha Hayes's niece." It was not a question. "I was sorry to hear of her passing. She was a good woman." Before Nora could respond, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Bennett Walker, are you going to stand there all day? Some of us have shopping to finish." It was Mrs. Pritchard, the banker's wife, a woman whose opinion of herself far exceeded her actual importance. Bennett stepped aside with a slight incline of his head, his expression carefully neutral. But Nora saw the muscle tick in his jaw, saw the way his scarred face became a mask. She wanted to say something, to somehow acknowledge that she understood, but he was already moving away back to his shopping. The moment was over. That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the coyotes sing in the distance, Nora could not stop thinking about Bennett Walker's hands catching her, steady and sure, or the way he had not flinched from her limp any more than she had flinched from his scars. The following week brought a rare spring rain that turned the dusty streets of Bisbee into rivers of red mud. Nora discovered that her roof leaked in 3 places, and she spent a frantic hour positioning buckets and pans to catch the drips. When the rain finally stopped, she knew she would need to do something about the roof before the next storm. Her nearest neighbor, a widow named Sarah Finn who lived a quarter-mile down the road, came by the next morning with fresh eggs and advice. Sarah was perhaps 50 years old, with silver-streaked brown hair and a direct manner that Nora appreciated. "You will need someone to patch that roof," Sarah said, eyeing the wet spots on the ceiling. "Tommy Chen in town does good work, or you could ask Bennett Walker. His ranch is just over that ridge, and he helped Martha more than once." "I would not want to impose," Nora said quickly, though her small savings would stretch further if she did not have to pay for repairs. Sarah gave her a knowing look. "Bennett is not one to mind helping a neighbor. He keeps to himself mostly, but he is a good man despite what some of the town gossips might say." "What do they say?" The question was out before Nora could stop it. The usual foolishness that small minds produce, that he is cursed, that he is dangerous, that those scars mark him as trouble. Sarah shook her head. "Truth is, he got those scars saving his younger sister from a mountain lion when he was 19. Killed the beast with his bare hands, they say, but not before it marked him. His sister lived without a scratch, and Bennett has never spoken of it since. He was already running the Walker Ranch by then, after his parents died of influenza, and he has made it one of the most successful spreads in the territory." Nora absorbed this information, her heart aching for the young man who had sacrificed his face to save his sister, only to be treated as something frightening by the very people he lived among. "Where is his sister now?" she asked. "Married and living in Tucson. She visits sometimes, but Bennett is alone on that ranch except for his hired hands." Sarah paused. "Rather like you are alone here. Martha often said she wished you would come to Bisbee while she was still alive. She spoke of you fondly." Guilt twisted in Nora's chest. "I should have come sooner. I kept meaning to, but there was always something, and then it was too late." Sarah patted her hand. "We do what we can with what we know at the time. Martha understood that you had your own struggles." That afternoon, Nora decided to walk to the Walker Ranch. It took her nearly an hour, her limp making the journey longer than it would have been for most people. But the day was clear and cool, and she welcomed the exercise. The ranch house came into view as she crested a low hill. a sprawling adobe structure with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered nearby. Cattle dotted the landscape, and she could see men working with horses in a distant corral. She was halfway down the slope toward the house when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Turning, she saw Bennett Walker riding toward her on his bay horse, a second horse trailing behind him. He pulled up beside her, and she had to shade her eyes against the afternoon sun to see his face. "Miss Hayes," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "that is a long walk from your place. I was coming to see you, actually. I need help with my roof, and Sarah Finn suggested you might know someone who could repair it." Bennett dismounted in one smooth motion. "I can take a look at it myself if you like. When did you notice the problem?" "During the rain yesterday. There are 3 leaks that I could find." He nodded, then gestured to the second horse. "You should not have to walk all this way. Would you allow me to give you a ride back to your place?" Nora hesitated. She had been on horseback before, but mounting was always awkward with her leg, and she hated the fumbling embarrassment of it. Bennett seemed to read her thoughts. "I can help you up, if you are comfortable with that." There was no mockery in his voice, no impatience, only a simple offer of assistance. Nora found herself nodding. He led her to the second horse, a gentle-looking mare with kind eyes. "This is Daisy. She is the calmest horse I own. I will give you a boost, and you just swing your good leg over. Take your time." His hands were sure and strong as he helped her mount, and to her relief, she managed it without too much awkwardness. Bennett swung onto his own horse with practiced ease, and they began the journey back to her house at an easy walk. "How are you settling into Bisbee?" he asked after a few moments of comfortable silence. "Well enough. The house is smaller than I expected, but it is mine, which is more than I have had before. Martha was proud of that house. She and your uncle built it themselves back in '65. Did you know my uncle as well?" "Only briefly. He died not long after I moved here with my family, but Martha was a fixture in these parts. She delivered my sister, actually, and half the babies in the county besides." Nora smiled. "She always wrote about her work. I think she enjoyed being useful. That is a fine thing to be." Bennett paused. "What do you plan to do here? Will you take up your aunt's work?" "I have no training as a midwife. My aunt offered several times to teach me, but I was living too far away to make it practical." Nora hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I have worked as a seamstress in various towns. I am hoping to establish myself here doing the same. My leg makes many other types of work difficult." She watched him carefully, waiting for the pitying look or the uncomfortable changing of the subject. Instead, Bennett simply nodded. "There is always need for a good seamstress. Mrs. Chen does most of the mending in town, but she is getting older and has spoken of wanting to slow down. You should talk to her." They reached her house as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. Bennett helped her dismount with the same patient assistance he had shown before, then retrieved a ladder from one of the outbuildings and climbed up to inspect the roof. Nora waited below, watching him move across the weathered shingles with confident steps. After several minutes, he climbed back down. "You have got 3 shingles that need replacing and some flashing around the chimney that has come loose. I can bring the materials tomorrow and have it fixed by afternoon." "What do I owe you for the work?" Bennett shook his head. "Call it a neighborly welcome to Bisbee." "I cannot accept that. It would not be right." He studied her for a long moment, his scarred face thoughtful. "Martha used to make a lemon cake that was the best thing I ever tasted. She brought me one every year on my birthday. If you could make one of those, we would call it even." Nora felt warmth spread through her chest. "I know that recipe. She included it in a letter once. I will make you 2. The corner of Bennett's mouth quirked up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Then we have a deal, Miss Hayes." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat to her. "I will see you tomorrow mid-morning." Nora watched him ride away, something unfamiliar and fragile blooming in her chest. She recognized it after a moment as hope. True to his word, Bennett arrived the next morning with a wagon full of shingles and tools. Nora invited him in for coffee while she prepared to start the lemon cakes, but he politely declined, saying he wanted to get started while the weather held. She worked in her kitchen, measuring flour and sugar and carefully zesting lemons, while the sound of hammering came from overhead. It was strangely domestic, strangely comfortable, to be baking while someone repaired her home. She had lived alone for so long, moving from boarding house to boarding house, always isolated by her limp and the cruelty it inspired in others. This felt different. This felt like what she imagined a real home might be. By midday, Bennett climbed down from the roof and knocked on her door. "All finished. You should not have any more leaks." "The cakes need another hour to cool before I can frost them," Nora said. "Would you like some lunch? I have made sandwiches." She saw him hesitate, saw the surprise cross his face. "I do not want to impose on your kindness. You just spent 3 hours repairing my roof. The least I can do is feed you a sandwich." They sat on her porch, eating ham sandwiches and drinking cool water from her well. The view stretched out before them, all red earth and endless sky, and Nora felt something in her chest relax. "This land is so different from where I grew up," she said. "I was born in Missouri and everything there was green and close. Here you can see forever." "Where all have you lived?" Bennett asked. "Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico territory." "My mother died when I was 10 and my father could not care for me alone, so I went to live with various relatives. None of them kept me very long." She paused, the old pain still sharp after all these years. "My limp made me a burden. I could not help with all the chores and I was an extra mouth to feed. As soon as I was old enough, I found work and made my own way." "That must have been difficult," Bennett said quietly. "Being unwanted." "It was." Nora looked at him directly. "But I imagine you understand something about being treated as unwelcome." His hand moved unconsciously to his scarred cheek, then dropped. "People fear what they do not understand. These scars make them uncomfortable, so they avoid me or whisper about me. I have learned not to care about their opinions." "Have you really?" Nora asked softly. "Because I have been telling myself the same thing for 12 years and it still hurts when they whisper." Bennett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than before. "No. I suppose I have not, but I pretend well enough that most people believe it." The honesty between them felt precious, like something fragile that needed protecting. Nora poured more water into his glass. "Your sister," she said. "Sarah told me what happened, that you saved her." "Sarah talks too much," Bennett said, but there was no heat in it. "She thinks highly of you. She wanted me to know that the town gossips are wrong about you being dangerous or cursed." "And what do you think, Miss Hayes?" Nora met his eyes, those deep blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her pretenses. "I think you are a man who knows what it is like to be judged for something beyond your control. I think you offered me kindness when you did not have to, and I think anyone who fears you is a fool." Something shifted in Bennett's expression, a kind of opening like a door being pushed ajar. "You are easy to talk to. I had not expected that. Because of my limp. Because most people want me to pretend the scars are not there. They want me to act as though nothing is different, while simultaneously treating me as though everything is. You look at me like I am just a man. It is refreshing." "You are just a man," Nora said simply. "A kind one from what I have seen." They finished their lunch in comfortable silence, and then Bennett helped her carry the dirty dishes inside. As he was preparing to leave, Nora felt a strange reluctance to see him go. "The cakes will be ready by evening," she said. "Should I bring them to your ranch, or would you prefer to collect them? I will come back for them, if that is all right. I have some fence to mend this afternoon, but I could stop by around supper time." Nora found herself nodding perhaps too eagerly. That would be perfect. After he left, she threw herself into finishing the cakes, whipping up the tart lemon frosting that her aunt's recipe called for and spreading it carefully over the cooled layers. She wanted them to be perfect, wanted to show Bennett that she could honor his bargain with something worthy of his help. But she also found herself changing into her better dress, the blue one that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinning her dark hair up more carefully than usual. She told herself it was just politeness, just wanting to look presentable, but her heart beat faster as the evening approached. Bennett arrived just as the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He had cleaned up from his work, his face freshly shaven and his hair damp, and Nora felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. She presented him with the 2 cakes, wrapped carefully in clean cloth. "I hope they are as good as my aunt's." Bennett lifted one of the cloths and inhaled deeply. "They smell exactly right. May I try a piece now, or would that be rude?" "I would be disappointed if you did not," Nora said, laughing. "I need to know if I got it right." She cut him a generous slice and watched with bated breath as he took his first bite. His eyes closed, and a look of pure pleasure crossed his scarred face. "Perfect," he said after swallowing. "Exactly like I remember. You have a gift, Miss Hayes." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Please call me Nora. I think we have moved past formality." "Then you should call me Bennett." He took another bite of cake, then looked at her seriously. "Would you allow me to take you into town on Saturday? I go in every week for supplies, and it would save you the walk. You could talk to Mrs. Chen about seamstress work." Nora's heart leapt. "I would like that very much." "Good." Bennett finished his cake and stood. "I will come by around 9 if that suits you." "That would be perfect." He paused at the door, his hat in his hands. "Thank you for lunch today, and for speaking honestly with me. It has been a long time since I had that kind of conversation with anyone. Thank you for fixing my roof, and for treating me like I am capable, not broken." Bennett's eyes held hers. "You are not broken, Nora. Anyone who says otherwise is blind." After he left, Nora sat on her porch and watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Her leg ached from the day's activities, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She thought about Bennett's scarred face and steady hands, about the way he had spoken to her as an equal, about the loneliness she recognized in him because it so perfectly matched her own. She was not fool enough to call it love, not yet. But it was something, some spark of connection that made her believe that perhaps, in this harsh and beautiful land, she might finally find a place where she belonged. Saturday dawned clear and cool. Nora woke early and dressed with care in her best outfit, a simple gray skirt and white blouse that she had sewn herself. She plaited her hair and wound it into a neat bun, then pinned on her bonnet and waited on the porch. Bennett arrived precisely at 9, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. He helped her onto the seat with his usual careful attention, and they set off toward town. The journey took nearly an hour, and they filled it with easy conversation about the land, the weather, the cattle business, and the challenges of living in the Arizona territory. Nora found herself relaxing in Bennett's presence, found that her usual guardedness fell away when she was with him. As they entered Bisbee, however, she felt tension creep back into her shoulders. She saw the looks people gave them, saw the way conversations stopped as they passed. The crippled woman and the scarred man, riding together. She could almost hear the gossip beginning. Bennett must have noticed her discomfort because he said quietly, "Let them talk. Their opinions do not matter. Easy to say, Harder to believe. I know. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the general store, but we will do it together, and that makes it easier. The simple statement, the casual we as though they were a unit, made Nora's throat tight with emotion. She nodded, unable to speak, and Bennett helped her down from the wagon. Mrs. Chen's shop was at the far end of the main street, a small storefront with a hand-painted sign that read "Alterations and Mending." The elderly Chinese woman who answered Nora's knock had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp black eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "You are Martha Hayes's niece," Mrs. Chen said without preamble. "I heard you had come to town. Come in, come in." The shop was crowded with bolts of fabric and half-finished garments hanging from every available surface. Mrs. Chen gestured for Nora to sit in one of the 2 chairs by the window. "Bennett Walker, you are too tall for my shop," Mrs. Chen said, but her tone was fond. "Go get your supplies and come back in an hour." Bennett glanced at Nora, who nodded. "I will be fine." After he left, Mrs. Chen studied Nora with those sharp eyes. "Sarah Finn tells me you are a seamstress. Show me your work." Nora had brought the blouse she was wearing as an example. She removed her shawl so Mrs. Chen could examine the stitching, the neat buttonholes, the carefully fitted seams. "Good work," Mrs. Chen pronounced. "Very good work. My eyes are not what they were, and my hands ache in the winter. I have more work than I can handle. If you are willing, I will send customers to you. You keep what they pay, but you must do good work and you must be fair in your prices." "I can do that," Nora said, hardly able to believe her luck. "There is one more thing." Mrs. Chen's expression grew serious. "People will talk. They will say you got this arrangement because of Bennett Walker, not because of your skill. They will say you are taking advantage of my age and my friendship with the Walker family. You must be prepared for that." "I am used to people talking about me," Nora said quietly. "But is there truly a friendship between your families?" Mrs. Chen smiled. "Bennett's mother saved my husband's life 30 years ago when he was injured in a mine collapse. She sat with him for 3 days while he fought a fever, nursing him when others said a Chinaman was not worth the effort. The Walker family has had my loyalty and my friendship ever since. Bennett is a good man, despite what the gossips say, and I think he needs someone like you. Someone like me. Someone who sees him, not his scars. Someone who knows what it is to be judged unfairly." Mrs. Chen patted Nora's hand. "Now go. Bennett will be back soon, and you young people should enjoy your day." Nora left the shop with her heart full of hope. She had work, real work, and a way to support herself. But more than that, she had the sense that she was building something here, putting down roots in a way she never had before. She found Bennett waiting by the wagon, his supplies already loaded. "How did it go?" he asked. "She is going to send me customers. I will have work, Bennett, real, steady work." His smile transformed his scarred face, making him almost handsome. "That is wonderful news. We should celebrate." "Celebrate how? There is a restaurant that makes decent food. Would you have lunch with me?" Nora felt a flutter of nerves. Sharing a meal on her porch was one thing. Sitting in a public restaurant, making their friendship visible to the whole town, was another. But she found herself nodding. "I would like that." The restaurant was small and crowded, filled with the smell of frying meat and fresh bread. Conversations died away as they entered, and Nora felt the weight of every eye in the room. Bennett kept his hand at her elbow, steady and reassuring, as he led her to a table near the back. They ordered steak and potatoes, and as they waited for their food, Nora became aware of the whispers starting up around them. "What is he doing with her? Both of them damaged goods, I suppose. It is shameful, really, being so public about it." Nora's hands clenched in her lap, her appetite already fading, but Bennett leaned forward, his voice low and fierce. "Look at me, Nora, not at them. just at me. She raised her eyes to his, saw the understanding there, the shared knowledge of what it meant to be discussed like an object rather than a person. When I was younger, Bennett said, his voice pitched for her ears alone, I let their words make me angry. I got into fights, said things I regretted, pushed away anyone who might have been a friend. It took me years to understand that their cruelty comes from their own fears and limitations, not from any truth about who I am. How did you learn to ignore it? I have not learned to ignore it. I have learned to value the opinions of people who matter more than the opinions of people who do not. And you, Nora Hayes, are rapidly becoming someone whose opinion matters very much to me. The frank admission made Nora's breath catch. You matter to me too, she said softly. Their food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence while the restaurant slowly returned to its normal volume around them. Nora found her appetite returning as she focused on Bennett rather than the other diners. He told her stories about his ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in this dry land, about the hired hands who worked for him and had become almost like family. You care about them, Nora observed. Your workers. Most ranchers treat their hired hands like tools. My father taught me that a ranch is only as good as the people who work it. I pay fair wages, and I do not tolerate cruelty to man or beast. In return, I have men who stay year after year and work as though the ranch were their own. Your parents sound like they were good people. They were. I wish they had lived to see the ranch prosper. Bennett paused. They would have liked you. My mother especially. She had no patience for people who judged based on appearances. The words settled warm in Nora's chest. She wished she could have known his parents, wished she could have grown up in a family that valued kindness over perfection. After lunch, Bennett drove her home, and this time Nora barely noticed the stairs. She was too busy watching the landscape pass by. Too busy enjoying the rumble of Bennett's voice as he pointed out landmarks and told her the histories behind them. When they reached her house, he helped her down from the wagon and lingered for a moment, his hat in his hands. Would you like to come to the ranch for supper tomorrow? He asked. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent roast and I would enjoy the company. Nora felt her heart skip. I would like that very much. Good, I will come get you around 4. After he left, Nora spun in a circle in her little house, her limp completely forgotten in her joy. She felt like a girl again, felt the possibility of happiness stretching out before her like the vast Arizona sky. The next afternoon, dressed in her blue dress and with her hair carefully arranged, Nora waited on her porch for Bennett. When he arrived, she saw that he too had taken care with his appearance, wearing a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. The Walker Ranch house was even more impressive up close. The main room had a large stone fireplace and furniture that showed signs of quality and age. Windows on 3 sides let in the golden afternoon light, and the walls were decorated with simple watercolor paintings of the landscape. My mother painted those, Bennett said, noticing her interest. She said if she could not have green hills, she would learn to love the red earth instead. She was talented. She was, about many things. Bennett gestured toward the kitchen. I need to check on the roast. Make yourself comfortable. Nora wandered around the room, studying the paintings more closely, examining the books on the shelves. She was surprised to find volumes of poetry alongside practical texts on animal husbandry and land management. You read poetry, she said as Bennett returned from the kitchen. He looked almost embarrassed. My mother loved it. She used to read to my sister and me every evening. After she died, I kept up the habit. It reminds me of her. Would you read me something? The request surprised Nora even as she made it, but Bennett's face lit up. He pulled down a well-worn volume of Whitman and opened it to a marked page. His rough voice gentled as he read, the words flowing over Nora like water. She closed her eyes and listened, thinking she had never heard anything so beautiful as this scarred rancher reading poetry in the golden light of his mother's house. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her. "Thank you," she said softly. "That was lovely. My mother always said that poetry reminds us that life is more than just work and survival, that beauty matters, even in harsh places." She was very wise. They ate supper at a small table by the window, the roast tender and flavorful, accompanied by roasted vegetables and fresh bread that Bennett admitted he had purchased from Mrs. Chen. The conversation flowed easily between them, and Nora felt herself relaxing further into the warmth of Bennett's presence. After supper, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The air cooled quickly as darkness fell, and Nora shivered slightly. Bennett disappeared inside and returned with a thick wool blanket, which he draped around her shoulders. His hands lingered for a moment, and Nora felt the warmth of them through the fabric. "Nora," he said quietly, "I want to be honest with you about something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I have lived alone for a long time. After my parents died and my sister married, I convinced myself that I was content with solitude, that I did not need anyone else, that wanting companionship was a weakness I could not afford." He paused, and she saw him gathering courage. "But these past weeks, getting to know you, spending time with you, I have realized that I was lying to myself. I was not content. I was lonely. And now that I have had a taste of what it is like to have someone to talk to, someone who understands, I find I do not want to go back to being alone." Nora's breath caught in her throat. "Bennett, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I care about you. More than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. I am saying that when I am with you, I forget to be self-conscious about my scars because you make me feel like I am just a man, not a curiosity or a tragedy. I am saying that I think about you constantly, and I wake up looking forward to seeing you again, and I would very much like to court you properly if you would allow it." Tears pricked at Nora's eyes. "I feel the same way. When I am with you, I do not feel like the crippled girl everyone pities. I feel like myself, like the person I was always meant to be if the world had been kinder. You make me feel whole, Bennett. You make me feel like I matter. You do matter. You matter so much." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know the town will talk, but I do not care about any of that. I care about you, Nora Hayes, and I want to see where this could go." "So do I," Nora whispered. Bennett raised her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. "Then we are agreed. We will face whatever comes together." The word "together" settled into Nora's heart like a promise. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. For the first time in her life, someone saw her completely and wanted her anyway. The autumn months passed in a golden haze of happiness. Bennett courted Nora with old-fashioned formality, calling on her 3 times a week, taking her on drives through the countryside, sharing meals and conversations that lasted for hours. The town gossips had plenty to say about the match, but their words grew softer as summer turned to fall, and it became clear that the relationship was serious. Nora's seamstress work flourished. Mrs. Chen sent her a steady stream of customers, and word spread about the quality of her alterations and mending. She hired Sarah Finn to help with deliveries, and the extra income meant she could make improvements to her little house, could buy fabric for new dresses, could feel secure in a way she never had before. But it was not the work or the security that made her happiest. It was the knowledge that Bennett would come riding up her road 3 evenings a week like clockwork. It was the way his scarred face lit up when he saw her. It was the feeling of his hand in hers as they walked slowly around her property, accommodating her limp without ever mentioning it. It was the sound of his voice reading poetry on quiet evenings, or the taste of the meals they cooked together in her small kitchen. They were both careful about propriety. Bennett never stayed past dark, and they were never alone in a way that would damage Nora's reputation. But the feelings growing between them were undeniable, deepening with each passing day. It was early November when Bennett asked her to come to the ranch to meet his sister. Clara Walker Mitchell was visiting from Tucson with her husband and 2 small children, and Bennett wanted Nora to meet them. Nora was nervous as they rode to the ranch that Saturday afternoon. Meeting Bennett's family felt significant, felt like a step toward something permanent that both thrilled and terrified her. Clara was a pretty woman of perhaps 26, with her brother's dark hair and blue eyes but without the scars. She greeted Nora with warmth and genuine interest, and her 2 children, a boy of 4 and a girl of 2, ran circles around Bennett with obvious adoration for their uncle. "It is so good to finally meet you," Clara said, taking both of Nora's hands. "Bennett has written about you, and I was beginning to worry he would never find someone who could see past the exterior to the man underneath." "Your brother makes that easy," Nora said honestly. "He is one of the kindest men I have ever known. He always has been." Clara glanced at her brother, who was being climbed on by his nephew and niece, and smiled. He was the best brother a girl could ask for. "He gave up so much to raise me after our parents died, and then he nearly gave his life to save mine. I have always wanted him to find happiness, but he was so determined to be alone." "I think we were both determined to be alone," Nora admitted. "We had both been hurt too many times to believe we deserved anything else. And now I believe that maybe with the right person happiness is possible after all." Clara squeezed her hands. "I am so glad. Bennett deserves that. You both do." They spent a wonderful afternoon together. Clara's husband David was a quiet man who worked as a surveyor, and he and Bennett talked about land boundaries and water rights while the women prepared supper. Nora found herself relaxing into the comfortable family atmosphere, found herself imagining what it would be like to be part of this family permanently. After the children were put to bed, and David had excused himself to review some papers, Clara pulled Nora aside. "Can I show you something?" she asked. She led Nora to a small bedroom that had clearly been hers as a girl. The furnishings were simple but well made, and on the dresser sat a framed photograph of a younger Bennett with both of his parents. "This was taken 2 weeks before they died," Clara said softly. "See how he is smiling. He smiled all the time back then. He was 19 and in love with life and full of plans for the future." She paused. "After the mountain lion attack, after he saved me, the smiles stopped. He turned inward, became serious and careful. He built walls to protect himself from more hurt. For years, I have wanted to see that smile again, that openness. And do you know when I finally did?" "When?" Nora asked, her throat tight. "This afternoon when you arrived." He smiled like he used to smile, like the weight of the world was not on his shoulders. "You have given that back to him, Nora. You have given him back himself." Tears slipped down Nora's cheeks. "He has done the same for me. Before I met him, I thought I would always be alone, always be the girl with the limp that everyone pitied or mocked. But he makes me feel beautiful. He makes me feel worthy of love." Clara hugged her tightly. "Then you are perfect for each other. And I hope with all my heart that he asks you soon what I think he is planning to ask." Nora's heart leapt. "What do you mean?" "He wrote to me 3 weeks ago, asking if I still had our mother's ring. He wanted to know if I would mind if he gave it to someone else, someone special." Clara smiled through her own tears. "I sent it to him last week, so I would not be surprised if a proposal is coming very soon." That night, as Bennett drove Nora home under a sky full of stars, she felt as though she might burst with happiness. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Clara likes you," he said softly. "She told me that if I do not marry you, she will never forgive me." "Is that so?" Nora tried to keep her voice light. "It is." Bennett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of her house but made no move to help her down. Instead, he turned to face her, his scarred face serious in the moonlight. "Nora, we have known each other for 6 months now. I know that is not very long by some standards, but I feel like I have known you my entire life. You fit into my world so perfectly, like you were always meant to be there." "I feel the same way," Nora whispered. "I am not a fancy man. I have a ranch and a house and some money saved, but I cannot offer you luxury or excitement. What I can offer you is a home where you will always be valued, a partner who will never judge you for things beyond your control, and a love that will last the rest of my life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Nora Hayes, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond, beautiful in its unpretentiousness. Nora looked from the ring to Bennett's face, saw the hope and love and vulnerability there, and knew that her answer had been written in her heart since the moment he had caught her in the general store and told her the floor was uneven. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Bennett, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Nora felt as though she were finally home. They were married 6 weeks later in early December in a small ceremony at the Walker Ranch. Sarah Finn stood up for Nora, and David Mitchell served as Bennett's best man. Clara and her children attended, along with Mrs. Chen and her husband, and a handful of Bennett's ranch hands. The circuit preacher performed the service, and though it was small and simple, it was perfect. Nora wore a dress of pale blue silk that she had sewn herself, and Bennett wore his best suit. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed her tenderly, and Nora knew that this was what she had been searching for her entire life. Not perfection, but belonging. Not pity, but partnership. Not someone who would ignore her limp, but someone who saw it as just one part of who she was, no more important than the color of her eyes or the sound of her laugh. The small gathering celebrated with food and music, and Nora danced with her new husband despite her limp, their movements slow and careful and full of joy. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Bennett swept Nora into his arms and carried her over the threshold of the ranch house that was now her home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Walker," he said softly, setting her down in the main room. "Home," Nora repeated, tasting the word. "I like the sound of that." They spent their first night as husband and wife talking by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for their future. They talked about expanding the ranch, about Nora continuing her seamstress work if she wanted to, about the family they hoped to build together. "I want you to be happy here," Bennett said. "I want this to be a real home for you, not just a place you live." "It already is," Nora assured him. "You are my home, Bennett. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Nora felt desire kindle warm in her belly. They moved together to the bedroom that had been Bennett's alone and became theirs, and Nora discovered that the tenderness and care Bennett showed her in every other aspect of their relationship extended to this as well. He was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs, and when they finally came together, Nora felt complete in a way she never had before. Afterward, lying in Bennett's arms with her head on his scarred chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Nora thought about the journey that had brought her here. All the pain, all the loneliness, all the years of feeling broken and unwanted had led her to this moment, to this man, to this home. And she would not change a single step of that journey because it had made her who she was, and it had made her appreciate what she had found. "What are you thinking about?" Bennett asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am thinking about how perfectly we fit together," Nora said. "Two people who understand what it is to be judged for their outsides, who found each other and built something beautiful. I am thinking that you were right. That day in the general store when you caught me, we match perfectly." Bennett's arms tightened around her. "We do, love. We truly do." The winter passed in quiet contentment. Nora settled into life as a rancher's wife, managing the household and continuing her seamstress work when she wanted to, though Bennett made it clear that she never had to work another day if she chose not to. She found she enjoyed the freedom to choose, enjoyed the balance between her own work and the shared work of making their home. Bennett was everything she could have hoped for in a husband. He was attentive and affectionate, never taking her for granted, always making sure she felt valued and loved. They developed routines together, small rituals that made their life feel rich and full. Morning coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the red earth. Evening walks around the property, Bennett matching his stride to hers without ever making her feel rushed. Nights by the fire, reading poetry or simply talking, sharing their thoughts and dreams. The town gossips gradually lost interest in them as it became clear that the marriage was solid and happy. A few people remained unkind, but Nora found that their words had lost their power to hurt her. She had Bennett, and she had a home, and she had purpose. What did it matter what small-minded people thought? In early spring, Nora realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another few weeks to be certain, then shared the news with Bennett over breakfast one morning. "I am pregnant," she said simply, watching his face. Joy blazed across his scarred features. He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Nora asked, though she could see that he was. Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am thrilled. I am terrified. I am grateful beyond words." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You have given me so much already, Nora, and now this, a family of our own." The pregnancy was not easy. Nora's leg ached more than usual, and the extra weight made walking difficult. But Bennett was endlessly patient, helping her with everything, never complaining about the extra work. He hired additional help for the house so Nora could rest, and he read medical books about pregnancy and childbirth, determined to understand what she was going through. Clara came to stay for the last month of Nora's pregnancy, bringing her expertise as a mother and her warm presence. The two women grew close during those weeks, and Nora felt blessed to have a sister, something she had never experienced before. The baby came on a hot day in late September, after 12 hours of hard labor. Clara and the midwife attended Nora while Bennett paced outside, clearly beside himself with worry. But when the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling, Bennett was called in immediately. "It is a boy," the midwife said, placing the infant in Nora's arms. "A big, healthy boy." Bennett knelt beside the bed, his eyes fixed on his son, tears streaming down his scarred face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Nora, you did it. He is perfect." They named him James after Bennett's father, and he was indeed perfect. Dark-haired like both his parents, with bright blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. As the weeks passed and James grew, Nora marveled at how much love she had for this tiny person, how fiercely protective she felt. Bennett was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he fussed, singing the lullabies his own mother had sung to him. Watching her husband with their son, Nora felt her heart expand with a love so deep it almost hurt. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter they named Martha, after Nora's aunt. Martha had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin, and she ruled the household from the moment she arrived. James adored his little sister, always wanting to help care for her, and the house rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Life was full and busy and chaotic in the best possible way. The ranch prospered under Bennett's management, and Nora's seamstress work became more of a hobby than a necessity, though she still took on special projects that interested her. They added on to the house, creating more bedrooms for their growing family, and planted a garden that Nora tended with care. The years rolled on, bringing both joys and sorrows. Sarah Finn passed away peacefully in her sleep when James was 5, and Nora mourned the loss of her first friend in Bisbee. Mrs. Chen retired and moved to Tucson to live with her daughter, passing her shop to a young woman from California. Clara's husband, David, was kicked by a horse and walked with a permanent limp afterward, an experience that created an unexpected bond between him and Nora. Through it all, Bennett and Nora's love deepened and matured. They weathered droughts and good years, struggled through childhood illnesses, and celebrated milestones. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, learned how to fight fairly and make up sweetly, learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice they made every single day. When James was 8 and Martha was 6, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and there were moments when Nora feared she might lose the baby. But Bennett was steadfast beside her, and in the early spring of 1895, they welcomed twin boys they named Thomas and Samuel. The twins were a handful, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, while Samuel was bold and adventurous. James took his role as big brother seriously, helping to watch the twins, while Martha announced that she had enough brothers and would prefer a sister next time. "I think 4 children is plenty," Nora told Bennett one evening after they had finally gotten all the children to bed. She was 34 years old, and while she loved their family, she felt complete. "4 is perfect," Bennett agreed, pulling her into his arms. "We have created something beautiful here, Nora. A real family full of life and love. We have," she said softly. "And to think, it all started because you caught me when I stumbled in the general store." "Best stumble of my life," Bennett said, kissing her forehead. "Though I think I was already falling before I ever touched you. One look at your face, at the way you held your head high despite everything, and I was lost." "We saved each other," Nora said. "2 broken people who found each other and became whole." "We were never broken," Bennett corrected gently. "We were just waiting for someone who could see our true worth." The years continued to pass, bringing changes both large and small. James grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch and showed a natural talent for working with cattle. Martha proved to have her mother's skill with a needle and her father's head for business, and she began helping Nora with more complicated sewing projects. The twins remained inseparable, getting into mischief together and charming their way out of trouble with matching grins. Bennett's hair began to gray at the temples, and lines appeared around Nora's eyes, but they both agreed they had never been happier. They had built a life together that honored both of them, that made space for Nora's limp and Bennett's scars without letting those things define them. The ranch hands who worked for Bennett were fiercely loyal, many of them staying for decades. They respected the way Bennett treated them fairly, The way Nora made sure they were well fed and cared for, and the way the Walker family created an atmosphere of respect and dignity for all. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Bennett took Nora on a trip to Tucson to visit Clara. It was the first time they had been away from the children for more than a day, and while Nora missed them fiercely, she also enjoyed having Bennett all to herself. They stayed in a hotel, a luxury they had rarely experienced, and went to the theater and ate in restaurants and walked through the city streets arm in arm. Clara hosted a dinner party in their honor, and Nora realized as she looked around the table at the faces of the people gathered there that she had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. "What are you thinking?" Bennett asked as they prepared for bed that night. "I am thinking about the girl I was when I came to Bisbee," Nora said. "Lonely and afraid, convinced that I would always be alone because of my limp. And I am thinking about how wrong I was, how much life had in store for me that I could not even imagine." "That girl was brave," Bennett said. "She took a chance on a new place, on a new life. She opened her heart when it would have been easier to stay closed off. That bravery brought her to me, and I am grateful for it every single day." "I am grateful for you," Nora said, "for your kindness and your patience and your love. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "As you gave me," Bennett replied, pulling her close. "We are quite a pair, are we not? We match perfectly," Nora said, echoing the words she had spoken so many years ago. "We do," Bennett agreed. "We always have." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, and afterward, Nora lay in Bennett's arms and thought about how far they had come. From two lonely, scarred people to a family of 6, from isolation to community, from pain to joy. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. When they returned to the ranch, they were greeted by 4 excited children who had missed them desperately. James, now 18, had managed the ranch competently in his father's absence, and Martha had kept the house running smoothly. The twins had only gotten into one major scrape, involving a chicken, a rope, and the barn roof, which everyone agreed was actually quite good for them. Life settled back into its familiar rhythms. James announced that he wanted to stay on the ranch permanently, learning the business from his father so he could take over someday. Martha began courting the son of the family who had taken over Mrs. Chen's shop, a quiet young man named Peter who looked at Martha like she hung the moon. The twins started school, where they immediately became known as troublemakers, though their teacher admitted they were bright and could be serious when necessary. Bennett and Nora watched their children grow and change, marveling at the individuals they were becoming. They had tried hard to raise them with kindness and respect, to teach them that people's worth was not determined by their appearance or abilities, but by the content of their character. "You think we did all right by them?" Nora asked Bennett one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I think we did better than all right," Bennett said. "They are good people, Nora. They are kind and honest and hardworking. They treat others with respect, and they stand up for what is right." "What more could we ask for?" "Nothing," Nora agreed. "They are our greatest achievement." "Well, you are my greatest achievement," Bennett said, taking her hand. "Everything good in my life flows from you, and you are mine," Nora replied. "You took a broken girl and showed her she was whole. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. How could I not think you are the greatest gift of my life?" They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars emerged. Nora's leg ached, as it often did after a long day, but Bennett's hand in hers made even the pain bearable. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about all the pain and loneliness that had preceded this happiness. And she found she could be grateful even for the difficult times, because they had shaped her into someone strong enough to appreciate what she had. The years continued their steady march. Martha married Peter in a lovely ceremony at the ranch, and 2 years later, she gave birth to twin girls, making Nora a grandmother at 43. James married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a capable young woman named Alice who fit seamlessly into the Walker family. The twins, now young men of 17, were beginning to think about their futures, with Thomas interested in medicine and Samuel dreaming of exploring the territories further west. Bennett, now 51, had silver in his hair and beard, but he was still strong and vital, still running the ranch with the same dedication he always had. His scars had faded somewhat with age, becoming just another part of his face rather than the first thing people noticed. Or perhaps people had simply learned to look past them, to see the man rather than the marks. Nora's limp was more pronounced now, her leg often causing her pain, especially in cold weather. But she had long since stopped caring what anyone thought about the way she walked. She had a husband who loved her, children and grandchildren who adored her, and a life so full of joy that there was no room for shame. On a warm spring evening in 1908, 25 years after they had first met, Bennett and Nora celebrated their silver wedding anniversary with their entire family gathered around them. James and Alice were there with their 3 children, Martha and Peter with their twin daughters and newborn son, and Thomas and Samuel, now 21, and preparing to leave for college and adventure respectively. Clara and David came from Tucson, both graying and moving more slowly but still devoted to each other. The ranch hands, past and present, came to pay their respects. Even people from town who had once whispered about the scarred rancher and the crippled seamstress came to celebrate the marriage that had lasted a quarter-century and produced such a beautiful family. Bennett stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I married the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. She was brave enough to take a chance on a scarred rancher, brave enough to build a life with me when most people thought we were both damaged beyond repair. She has given me 4 incredible children, a home full of love, and more happiness than any man has a right to expect. Nora, you are my heart, my home, and my everything. Here is to 25 more years together. Nora wiped tears from her eyes as everyone cheered and drank to their health. When the noise died down, she stood slowly, Bennett's hand supporting her elbow. When I came to Bisbee 25 years ago, I was alone and afraid. I had spent my whole life being mocked for my limp, being told that I was less than others, being made to feel that I was not worthy of love or happiness. And then, I met a man who looked at me and saw not my limp but my strength, who treated me as an equal, who made me feel beautiful and valued and whole. Bennett, you gave me everything I never dared to dream of. You gave me a home, a family, and a love that has sustained me through every challenge. I am the luckiest woman alive, and I would not change a single moment of our life together. They kissed to more cheers, and then the celebration continued late into the night with food and music and dancing. Nora danced with Bennett, their movements slow and careful but full of joy, and she danced with each of her children and even her oldest grandchildren. As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Nora and Bennett found themselves alone on their porch once more, watching the stars wheel overhead in the vast Arizona sky. 25 years, Nora said softly. It has gone so fast. And yet it feels like I have known you forever, Bennett replied. Like we were always meant to find each other. Maybe we were, Nora said. Maybe every painful step of my journey was leading me to that moment in the general store when you caught me. Maybe every scar you earned was preparing you to be the man I needed. I like that thought, Bennett said. That all of it, all the pain and loneliness and struggle had a purpose, that it brought us to each other. It did, Nora said with certainty, and it was worth it. Every moment of pain was worth this happiness. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands the way they had for 25 years, and Nora felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. She had found her place in the world at last. She had found her person, her home, her purpose. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would love this scarred rancher until her last breath and beyond. The years that followed were gentler, slower. Bennett gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to James, though he still rode out most days to check on things and offer advice. Nora's seamstress work became purely recreational, projects for her grandchildren rather than income. They traveled occasionally, visiting Martha and Peter in Tucson where they had moved for Peter's business, or going to see Thomas, who had become a doctor in Phoenix. Samuel did go west, all the way to California, where he worked on ships and sent long letters describing his adventures. He never quite settled down the way his siblings did, but he came home regularly and always with wild stories that delighted his nieces and nephews. Bennett and Nora became pillars of the Bisbee community in their later years. Their example of a strong, loving marriage and successful family life made them respected figures. People sought Bennett's advice on ranching and business matters, while Nora became known for her wisdom and kindness, always willing to help a young mother or offer encouragement to someone struggling. The gossips who had once whispered about them were long forgotten or had learned better. The Walker family was too successful, too respected, too clearly happy for anyone to speak ill of them. And the younger generation of Bisbee residents did not remember a time when Bennett and Nora were not together, were not held up as an example of how love could overcome any obstacle. On a cool evening in late October 1918, Bennett and Nora celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary quietly at home, with just their children and grandchildren present. Bennett was 67 now, his hair completely silver, his body showing the wear of decades of hard physical work. Nora was 57, her dark hair streaked with gray, her limp more pronounced than ever. But their love was as strong as it had been in those early days, strengthened by decades of shared experiences, of facing challenges together, of building a life that honored both of them. "Do you remember what I said to you that first time we sat on your porch?" Bennett asked as they watched the sunset alone later that evening. "You said many things," Nora replied with a smile. "I said we matched perfectly." Bennett turned to look at her, his scarred face dear and familiar. "I was more right than I knew, not just because we both knew what it was like to be judged for our outsides, but because our hearts matched. Our hopes, our dreams, our values, everything that really mattered. We matched perfectly in all the ways that count." "We did," Nora agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We do. We always will." They sat together as darkness fell, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and well-maintained, ready to be passed down to the next generation. Their children were healthy and happy, living good lives, raising their own children with the same values Bennett and Nora had instilled. Their grandchildren were bright and full of promise, carrying forward the legacy of kindness and strength. It was everything Nora had never dared to dream of in those lonely years before Bisbee. It was more than Bennett had imagined possible in those isolated years after the mountain lion attack. Together, they had created not just a family but a legacy, not just a marriage but a testament to the power of love to heal and transform. "I love you," Nora said softly. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away." "Thank you for doing the same for me," Bennett replied, kissing the top of her head. I love you, Nora Walker, today, tomorrow, and always. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast sky above the Arizona Territory, Nora smiled. She had come to Bisbee a broken girl with nothing but a limp and a small inheritance. She had found a scarred rancher who saw past her limitations to her strength, who loved her not despite her flaws but as a complete person. Together, they had built a life of meaning and purpose, filled with love and family and joy. The girl who had been mocked for her limp since childhood had become a woman beloved by her husband, respected by her community, and adored by her descendants. And the scarred rancher who had been feared and avoided had become a pillar of that same community, a devoted husband and father, and a man known for his integrity and kindness. They had matched perfectly, just as Bennett had said all those years ago. Two imperfect people who had found in each other the acceptance and love they had been denied by the world. And from that love had grown something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.